Well, good morning. My name is Jackson Doles, and I'm sorry. I thought we were making fun of each other today. No, that was just Jackson last week. I'm sorry, yeah. My name is Michael. I am one of the pastors here at Cedarbrook, and it's really good to be here with you. It's so exciting to see your face here together as we are going through a message series called The Spirit. I know, it's a little crazy, like so foundational for church, and yet we don't hear much about it, right? Or maybe in your past you've heard way too much about it, right? There seems to be one side or another. So we wanted to put something together, tracing this biblical theme throughout the Bible so that we can see what the Spirit is really about. And it's going to take some adjustment in the way that we think. All right, the thoughts that we've had about the Spirit. And Jackson laid a really good foundation for us last week. Jackson, if you don't know Jackson, he's our worship director, and he preached last week, laying this foundation for us to understand what the Spirit really is all about right from the beginning. And so he talked about a few things, and one of those things was he gave us a new word. He taught us some Hebrew. Do anybody remember what that word is? Yes, good job. Ruach. Yeah, Ruach. Kind of clear your throat at the end of that. Yeah, Ruach. And it gets translated in three ways. He told us about these things, right? Spirit is one of those ways it gets translated, right? And so already we're probably picturing something in our mind of what that looks like. The Spirit of God is hovering over the waters, and I'm thinking about what that image even looks like, right? But then it also gets translated as wind. Well, that seems a little bit different, doesn't it? Right? This wind, wind, I kind of getting this concept a little bit, and it's very intuitive, the way that the ancient people thought about this. Like, it's just this thing that you feel the effects of, but you can't see it, right? It's this invisible thing out there. And then they bring that into the next part of it, which is breath, right? It gets translated as breath, another invisible thing that you breathe in, and you have this breath of life concept, right? And so you have all these kind of similar, but yet a little bit different nuances of this one word to communicate spirit. And then we talk about God's spirit, and then you talk about, human spirit and things like that. And what are we supposed to do with all of this? But remember, this is the groundwork for where we're going to go with the entire series. So the first foundation is just laying this all out, this invisible energy that's there that we see the effects of, but we don't actually see it, right? That's how we're supposed to start to understand that. But there's a fourth way that this gets translated. This will throw you for a loop. The fourth way is with our mind or our thoughts. What? That just seems really like a big jump, right, for us. Like, okay, spirit, got it, wind, breath, and now my thoughts in my mind? But they translate it that way. They use that word ruach to communicate things going on in our mind. There's a story in the Bible where this king, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, he's having some dreams, and they're messing with him a little bit. And so we see in that storyline, he wakes up, and here's what it says in Genesis 41:8. It says, in the morning, his ruach was troubled. His mind was troubled. In fact, some translations of the Bible will just translate it as spirit, right? But it doesn't really get at the whole thing, right? It's his mind, the thoughts going on in his mind. He's troubled in them. Like, you have this happen, right? Your mind, your ruach, and how they would understand it. You've got things racing in your mind. You wake up at night and you're thinking about this thing. You're worried about that, right? You get troubled in your mind, in your ruach. It's the ruach that he's talking about here is this invisible energy of our mind, right? It equals our thoughts. That's what it is. It's talking about our thoughts. That's how they use this one word to broad a whole thing. So it's not just one or the other. It can be a variety of these types of things. So if last week we learned about this breath of life that we take in and it creates, right? It animates, it creates and it sustains us. And now you have this Ruach, these thoughts that you have. What do we do with that? Because if we have these thoughts, it's implied that God also has these thoughts. And so it's all about connecting with God's thoughts, right? To be able to think the way God thinks, to have the same way and the same path that God has. This is very biblical, right? To be on the same page with God and to move in that direction. In my own life, the way that I can see this play out, I'm not going to pick on myself. I'm going to pick on some other people in my family because I get to. But when my oldest son, he was 7 at the time, he had this idea, and he went to his mom, Amanda, and he went to her, and he asked her for some help. He said, "Mom, would you help me to tie this rope to my bike? And then help me to tie the other end to this big metal Tonka dump truck." You remember those things? Because what he wanted to do was have his 5-year-old brother ride along in it, and so he could pull him up and down the sidewalk and in the big parking lot that we lived by, and he could just pull him around everywhere, right? And Amanda's response was, "I don't think that's a good idea." And I'm sitting here going like, that's a great idea with horrible consequences. Right? As a parent or whatever, what is going through your mind, right? Your Ruach. What is it thinking? It's thinking about all the bad things that can happen with this whole thing. What's Levi thinking? How fun it's going to be, right? This is going to be great. We have a brother get to go be in there. He's going to have a great time, right? Are their thoughts connected? Nope. Their thoughts are not connected. They each have their own thoughts, but they can't connect. Now, it would have been great for Levi to see what she was thinking, right, and see all the things that might have happened, but he can't. So what could have his response have been? "Oh, mother, your ways are not my ways. Your thoughts are above my thoughts. Let me trust your way." No, he's frustrated. He's like, "Man, you're just sucking the life out of everything, right? I just want to have fun with my brother. Why are you trying to ruin my life?" Right? Two different thoughts. When they're not connected, that's a problem. Now, let's take this into with God, right? If our Ruach can connect with God's Ruach, if our spirit can connect with God's spirit, if our thoughts could connect with God's thoughts, imagine the amazing things that we could do, right? In fact, biblically, this is what it is to be fully human, to rule and reign, right? To co-rule with God, to be fruitful and multiply and share in his wisdom is to think God's thoughts and then work it out, right? That's what it's all about. And we have people in the Bible, they do a great job of that. There's one guy in particular, his name is David. He starts out as a young shepherd boy, and it is communicated by God that David is a person, a human being, after God's own thoughts. I know the word is heart, right? Right? God's own heart, right? That's what it's saying. But that's where the Hebrew people, they had no concept for brain, right? So where your decisions come from, where your thoughts originate, where your emotions are, your desires, your will, your way, all of that is originating what they call the heart. Well, obviously that gets put into another context and translation, and it's our minds, it's our thoughts. He's a human being after God's own thoughts, after God's own ways. And when he's connected with God's thoughts, it's amazing, right? He's got no fear of this giant of a man that could easily kill him. He knows God's going to take care of it. He can conquer this giant with God. When he is being attacked by his enemies, he knows he's like, I don't have to take vengeance on them. God will do that, right? He can write beautiful songs and poetry communicating all of who God is when he's connected with God's thoughts. And then there was a day when he chose to not connect with God's thoughts. He chose to do things his own way. and to live things out in his own way. These invisible things going on inside of his mind became very visible. And when he did that, he started mistreating other images of God, other people that represent who God is, other people that had the breath of life in them, and he chooses to act like God and take their breath of life away, all to cover up his own misdeeds. You may be familiar with this story. It's a story about David when he was an old king, and a young girl in his kingdom, a young woman, married woman in his kingdom, called Bathsheba. And she had a husband who was non-Israelite. He was a Hittite, and his name was Uriah, and he was actually part of the army of David, right? And David has an idea in his mind that's going to do something for him, satisfy something in him, and he goes and takes this woman for himself. And when she becomes pregnant, and it's going to be revealed that, since her husband was away, that some misdeed had happened, what does he do to cover it up? Yeah, he's got a great idea about covering it up. I'll just bring her husband home from the army and try to convince him to stay with her over the night. Then, you know what? Everyone's going to think it's his kid. Uriah's too good for that. He won't do it. So David sends him back to the front lines to be murdered in battle, all to cover up his own thing, all his own thought, right? He's only thinking about what will be best for him. And then a God has had enough of this, so he speaks through a prophet to David, and David encounters this prophet Nathan, and Nathan calls him out on it. And it's all about how David responds to this, right? A human being after God's own thoughts then does things with his own thoughts apart from God. How can he come back and connect with God again? And I feel like, well, maybe it's just me, but I feel like that's me. Right? There's moments in my life where I'm like, yeah, this really is God's thoughts. In fact, it's hard to tell what's God's thoughts and my thoughts. Like they're going along really great and doing some things and saying some things that I'm like, that's just not on me alone. And other times I'm like, yep, that's completely me. The way that I've spoken to someone because of my own hurt or own pain, and I've destroyed them by my words, right? Or the way that I just mistreat someone and give them a cold shoulder or a bad glancing look, whatever, all because of something going on in me, because it's going to satisfy me in some way, right? I think we have these times in our life when we do that, and the point here is like, can we reconnect with God's Ruach? The answer is yes, and there's a way to go about it. So not only does God have a Ruach that creates and sustains life, but it is also God's Ruach that we can connect with our Ruach and our thoughts, and we can reconnect with him. So we're going to work through a process of how David did this because he did it the right way. And if you follow the rest of his life, it doesn't mean it fixed everything for him. His life after this is still kind of a disaster. There's some good highlights and some bad lowlights and things like that. Still in need of Jesus, okay? So we're seeing it from that end, and we're going to fill it out in the coming weeks of what that looks like. So let's take a look at what David does here in his response. We're going to look at Psalm 51. If you do not have a Bible and you would like to have a Bible, raise your hand nice and high. We'll have ushers back there that can get you a Bible. You can follow along. I am breaking in a new Bible because Jackson stole my other one. It's okay. He replaced it. It's good. He's using that one. I'm using this one. But if you need a Bible, please raise your hand and get one. Or you can go to cedarbrook.info, and it's got all the scripture that I'm going to use because I'm going to be flipping back and around here, and also some study materials there for you for further study if you want to take it a depth further. So this is David's response to God speaking through his prophet Nathan because of the misdeeds that he's done. Okay, and so here's how he's responding in the right way. Let's take a look at verse 1. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. What's David doing here? He's realizing that he has not followed God's ways. He acknowledges who God is. All right? He understands that God is this God of compassion and mercy, and he knows that he needs that because God is the only one that can forgive the thing that he did. The first step in this connecting with God's Ruach is to acknowledge that, well, you have not been thinking the way God has been thinking. It is that God's ways are greater than your ways. His thoughts are not your thoughts, and they need to be connected again, right? That would have been great for Levi and Amanda, right? It's great for us too. In fact, as you look at this, David knows exactly who God is because he's quoting the Bible's favorite verse about itself. Did you know that there's a favorite Bible verse that the Bible quotes all the time? Right? Some of us have our own Bible verses that we like. You know, like John 3:16, God so loved the world that he sent his son. Or we love the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. Or we got Jesus' prayer that he gives to us, right? Our Father who art in heaven. We have these favorite ones that we might be able to quote, or some personal ones. Well, the Bible has one too. It quotes it all the time. So you're going to hear what David says in what the Bible quotes about itself all the time. You like to know what the favorite verse is? Exodus, I love it. Go for it. Exodus 34, 6-7. This gets quoted and requoted throughout the Bible all over the place. They're obsessed with it. Here's what it says. This is a time when Moses is up on a mountain with God, and he wants to know God's name. Like, communicate who you are. And a name is all about who that person is. And so God communicates this is who he is. Starting in verse 6. The Lord, or Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of their parents to the third and fourth generation. David acknowledges who God is, right? That he doesn't line up with it. And I know right now the elephant in the room is like, he punishes the kids for the parents' sin. What? Let me just tell you what that's communicating. It's creative writing. It's biblical Hebrew. It's a turn of phrase, meaning that each generation has a choice. The third, the fourth generation has a choice to turn from their sin of their parents and not carry it on and follow Yahweh, or to continue to follow on, right? That's what it's communicating. And it's also putting that up against third or fourth generations compared to the thousands of generations that God extends his unfailing love to, okay? So let's just answer that first of all, okay? Each generation has a choice. David has a choice of whose thoughts he's going to connect with, how he's going to see this God, and he that's exactly what he does. He knows that this is the God of compassion and mercy and faithfulness that's even extended to him, and he's choosing right here to say, I want to be connected with you. Only you can forgive me of my sin because I know that you can punish me for it, right? God holds and maintains this mercy and justice all together, right? This mercy and justice that he holds together, and he's the only one who can do it. I need to connect with that, okay? So the first step is acknowledging who God is, right? Understanding that your thoughts are not God's thoughts. Here's the next thing that David does after he acknowledges who God is. He goes a step further. He's going to deal with his own wrongdoing. Let's take a look at Psalm 51 again, verse 3. This is David again addressing God. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict, and justified when you judge. He's acknowledging who God is, that he's not been thinking his thoughts. He's been doing things that seem right in his own eyes. And now he's addressing his own wrongdoing. It needs to be done. Right? It's not about blaming somebody else. It's not about trying to excuse it away. It's not trying to soften the blow in any way. It needs to be addressed. We have thought wrong and acted on those thoughts. The way that we've treated other people, the way we just maybe think about them is not right. It's not right. Did you pick up on the line in here where David says, against you and you alone I have sinned? I'm pretty sure Uriah the Hittite feels pretty sinned against, right? I'm pretty sure that Bathsheba is not feeling the best about what has happened to her. The point is that he's taking it deeper. He sees them as God's image bearers, ones that God has created, given the breath of life to represent him here on earth. And David mistreated that. He defiled that image. So he sees how they're connected to who God is. And that's why he says that. That's super deep. For me, that's super profound. To start thinking about other people as if they're images of God, it changes the way I think about them and the way that I should be treating them. And when I mistreat that image, I'm mistreating God. That needs to be dealt with. That has got to be addressed. And that's exactly what David does. Now, let's think about the story with Levi and Amanda. Did Levi sin? Nope. That's not a sinful thing. He didn't know the whole story, did he? He didn't see the whole picture. He just focused on, hey, this is the fun thing that's going to happen. If something went wrong, it was not his intention, right? He wasn't intending something bad to happen to her. Sometimes we just make errors because we don't know everything. Okay, that can be addressed. Yeah, I didn't know this. I made a mistake. I made an error. But sometimes those errors and those mistakes, well, they start taking deeper root. We start thinking even more harshly about things. And now that turns into this transgression against someone else, this sin against other people. That also needs to be addressed. Acknowledging who God is, addressing our own sinfulness, and then the final step to this piece is what David gives us here at the end. Now, you're going to hear some connecting things here. It's beautiful. We talked last week about how God's breath of life, it creates and sustains us. You're going to hear that in these next verses. So, Psalm 51, verses 10 through 12. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Do you see verse 10 in the beginning and verse 12 at the end? Create and sustain. And the Spirit, the Ruach, the thoughts of God are throughout there. Create a new way to think within me. Right? Connect with. Don't take this presence from me. I need to be connected to your thoughts. Connect with me so that I can be sustained. He's looking for this new path forward to once again be a human being after God's own thoughts. God, create that in me. It's like he's going back to page 1 of the Bible to being created as a human being all over again. Create me again, sustain me again, and I want to think your thoughts. May I think those thoughts. That's exactly what he's doing here. He's inviting God to do that, to connect with them by his choice. He's got to choose to do it, right? You can continue to go living on in our own way, what we think is right for our life. Believe me, I promise you, if everyone thought the way I thought, this would be a great place, right? This would be an outstanding place. You think the same thing, right? You think if everybody thought the way that you thought, it would be great. Everything would be going good. And if you don't think that, let me drive with you in traffic. Because you got a place to go, and everybody else should know that, right? We need to connect with God's thoughts to be not only created, but sustained by Him, to live out and be connected with Him, to be the full human being that we are created to be. Imagine the things that we can do when we are thinking God's thoughts and we're connected with His thoughts in this way. We just need to acknowledge who God is, address our own wrongdoing, and then ask to be recreated. That's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to take time this morning to do that through communion, to acknowledge who God is, as God that loves us so much, that is willing to send His Son to take on our punishment for our wrongs that we've done. He's going to address them for us and deal with that. And that we can then ask Him to be recreated. And so we're going to go and do that through communion this morning. And as we prepare for that, there's just a few things to kind of get us all on the same page for this. First of all, communion is open up to everyone. If you believe in Jesus, right, you have a faith in Jesus, you're welcome to come to the table here and be a part of this. So I know with different backgrounds, you might have different requirements. That's our requirement, that you have this belief in Jesus. We also serve juice here and not wine, just in case that was part of your tradition. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, we have a recovering community here that we don't want to be a stumbling block for, and also for kids. Kids can participate this as well. Of course, we expect the parents to have had those conversations knowing that the children have this faith in Jesus. Also, as a side note, today, back in CB Kids, they're learning about communion. So if your kid is back there, talk with them about it. Well, what did they learn and things like that? You can do that today. So we have a place for the kids to be able to take that as well. You can eat and drink this when you're ready, right? You can come down and get the elements and take them back to your seat. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have you come down the center aisle to here. And then there's a couple of options to know about. One, there is a gluten-free option if you need the gluten-free option. You can grab that here. Or if you like to have the self-serving cups, it's got the juice and the wafer all together, you can just take that. Or if you want someone to serve you, there will be people stationed here on either side, which I'm going to invite them to come on down and get ready for that now, our communion servers. And there's also going to be prayer at the outer edges there if you'd like to have some prayer for communion time as well. If you are not able to come down the aisle, come to the front, can you just let one of our ushers know? Just raise your hand, let them know that, and we'll have a servers get that to you as well. But for us to really prepare for this, let's remember that we need to take a moment to acknowledge who God is, address our own wrongs, and then ask for God to connect with our spirit. We're going to do that here as I read from 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Jesus gives us a way to connect with Him. Here's what it is. The Lord Jesus, on the night He was betrayed, took bread, and when He had given thanks, He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me," acknowledging what God has done for us. In the same way, after supper, He took the cup, saying, "This cup is my new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes." This is what we're doing with communion. It's our way of acknowledging who God is, one that shows compassion to thousands of generations, wants to forgive you, so much so that he sends his son to take on our punishment, to deal with and address our own wrongs, our own sin, so that we can now just ask to be connected with God. And so I give you this prayer from David to connect with him as you prepare for communion. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Amen.